Good morning. It's June 7th, 2020, and I'm Margaret Trugovich, the president of Hartwick College. Well, when Beth and I took our walk yesterday, it was really great to see that people were dining outside of the restaurants in Oneonta. That's allowed now, sidewalk dining. We continue to make progress against COVID-19, and we really look forward to being able to give you news soon of our final plans for how to reopen in the fall. These videos that I've been doing every week since we've closed due to the COVID crisis have been designed to bring you updates on COVID. But there's been so much pain in the wake of the George Floyd death at the hands of police in Minneapolis that I would like to once again devote a fair amount of this video today, as I did last week, to this tragedy. In times of trouble, I always find that I go back and I re-examine what I think I know about who I am in relationship to a particular crisis and how I see the world. So in that regard, I'd like to send a message to our students again this morning that starts with a personal story, because I think that our commitment to social justice is a personal commitment. No matter what we say as a society, we believe those values start with each of us. So I grew up in rural Ohio. I think there was one family of color in my very small elementary school. So when I got to college, I was interested in the fact that I had been assigned as a roommate a woman of color. I didn't have a strong feeling about it. I didn't have an opinion about it, actually. I had so little exposure to racial diversity that I saw her simply as the person that she was. I suppose I was being a bit naive about that. And I guess I exposed my naivete when I asked her if she would like to go home to Ohio with me for the Thanksgiving break. I thought it was a great idea. She was just like me. We both worked hard. I liked her. I thought she was smart and funny. So I invited her to come to my home. I was surprised when she laughed, and she said she wouldn't. And she laughed at me and she said, "Why would I go to Ohio?" I said, "Well, why wouldn't you go?" And she said, "Well, maybe you don't know this, but the Ohio is filled with race-based hatred." And she specifically noted the KKK. I said to her, I had no experience of the KKK in my upbringing, and yet, as we talked, I had to admit to her, I did not know if she was right or if she was wrong. Just because it wasn't part of my experience doesn't mean it wasn't true. I remember this story. I hadn't thought about it for a long time. But it reminds me that we're just all products of the environments that we grow up in, and we're shaped by those environments and by the people in our lives. You cannot shed your past, even if you wish you could. All we can do is grow up, gain perspective and maturity, and develop our own sense of what is right and what is just. That is why I am so encouraged by the work that is being done as part of the Promise initiative at Hartwick. The Promise places students at the center of our educational enterprise even more intentionally than we have in the past. The entire goal of the Promise initiative is to support each of our students as an individual, to accept them where they begin, and to help them go where they wish to go. Now, of course, at the core of every educational institution is its program. And we've reshaped the institutional and educational outcomes as part of the Promise initiative. So, for example, Educational Outcome 6 states that students will, and I'll quote here, benefit from and make meaningful contributions to a welcoming community that fosters the well-being, equity, and inclusion of all its members before and beyond graduation. That's an educational goal that we have as part of the Promise Initiative. It's a focus on inclusion, and it helps us to ensure that we'll continually and intentionally keep issues such as diversity at the center of the way we think about learning. We've also made a revision to General Education Outcome 4, and that particular outcome states, and again I'll quote, that we will engage in constructive dialogue among diverse perspectives, demonstrating political and cultural fluency. Once again, this outcome ensures that students will be exposed to courses that reflect diverse perspectives as part of our general course of study. This plan also includes the addition of Intercultural Affairs coordinators, so expanding our current intercultural affair effort. And of course, there are other initiatives within the plan. I won't go through all of them today, but if the board approves the plan in June, we're going to have an important recentering that I think you'll find reassuring, because it will be an intentional effort for us to move the very issues that are at the core of the George Floyd tragedy forward as an educational community. And these things are all in addition to what we already do. So for example, already requiring anti-bias training of every employee every year. If you want to work at Hartwick, it's something that's already required. But at the end of the day, it's never the end. We're really just beginning every day to learn what we need to know in the face of changing circumstances so that we can continue to make progress. I believe that as an educational institution, and I said this last week, as educated people, education unlocks the opportunities for making these changes. And I think Frank Bruni said it really well this morning in an op-ed that was published in the New York Times. And I'm going to quote him here. Quote from Fred Bruni, quote, "A vaccine for the coronavirus won't inoculate anyone against the ideological arrogance, conspiracy theories, and other internet-abetted passion and prejudice that drives Americans apart. But the perspective, discernment, and skepticism that a liberal arts education can nurture just might." End quote. I couldn't agree with Mr. Bruni more. And that's what we do at Hartwick. This is a moment in time, not where we find an end. I sense that at Hartwick and across our country, we are at a new beginning again. And as I've said before in these videos, where there is learning, there is hope. So next week, we will host a forum to discuss what more we can learn from the Floyd tragedy. If the promise is a new beginning, then there's more to come. So we'll talk together about what more we might be able to learn from the Floyd tragedy. Also, appended to this message, I'm including the email message that I sent out to our community earlier this week for those of you who might not have seen it. And finally, today I do want to end with another meaningful musical performance. I found myself turning to music at the end of each of these videos each week because in music and art there's so much meaning. And so this particular video is a performance by John Legend and Common. It was done at the 2015 Oscars, and this is a performance that commemorates the 50th anniversary of the marches on Selma in 1965. Those marches, those peaceful protests, inspired by Dr. King, led to the Voting Rights Act, which changed everything in this country. There is more change to come. I hope you enjoy this performance. Stay healthy. Stay well. Have a great Sunday.